And we're back on today's episode of Relationships with Adenyke. It's our masterclass episode, and we're having a very interesting conversation with Juanita Ingram on loving yourself, knowing yourself, and some of the principles that guide our lives and to empower us. And just before we went on the break, you're just touching on some very interesting topics within a lot of what you said, are just some very key principles in life that I realized that has come from a particular place, and I just wanted to explore that further. Hearing you speak, I hear somebody who can tell a story of a defining moment, of a time in your life that defined you, defined some of the principles that govern how you live right now.
Yes.
And I'll just be quite interested in knowing that story.
I could think of one time in particular in my life. It was when I was in law school. And I was mentioning earlier, my undergrad degree, my bachelor's degree is in accounting.
Yeah.
A very objective discipline. 1 + 1 always equals 2.
Right. That's
then
true.
I transitioned and went into the field of law where I could argue maybe it should equal 2, maybe it shouldn't. It was a very subjective,
Right.
totally different area. And I struggled my first semester. So I'm first generation lawyer. There were a lot of students that were there, their parents were lawyers, their family members were lawyers. No one else in my family was a lawyer. I went to law school. I didn't even know how to brief a case. I just went. And I had no support, no background in terms of what I was doing, and I struggled my first semester. And in grad school, if you make too many C's, you can get kicked out of a graduate program. So I struggled the first semester, and my academic advisor at the law school, he said to me, "You should drop out of law school. You are not going to be a lawyer.
Wow.
You will never get hired, not with these kind of grades. You may not pass. You may not even finish. You probably won't even pass the bar exam. You don't exhibit that you have the potential to do this."
Oh, that must have been...
It was devastating.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, I remember the color of the carpet because that's how my head was hung so low. He didn't encourage me, never offered any advice that, here's some study aids, here's someone you can talk to, we can get you some. No, it was just a summation.
Yes.
This isn't for you. You don't have what it takes.
Final judgment.
Just a blanket judgment. You're not cut out for this. And, I had been accustomed to, I was a presidential scholar, I graduated with honors and cum laude. I had never really academically failed or struggled in my life because I always worked hard. And to me, working hard always meant that you would be okay if I worked so hard that first semester, and it just wasn't enough in and of myself. And then to have this from my advisor, he was just like, you don't have what it takes.
Right.
So I contemplated at the end of that summer, I was going to drop out of law school. And I was listening to his words, and I thought, well, maybe. He said, you should probably go across the street to the business school, maybe get your MBA. Maybe you're more cut out for business, but you are not a lawyer. And those words, I allowed them to take root for a minute. And it was very heartbreaking for me. I felt like I was going to let my family down. I felt like I was letting everybody down. And that summer, I had an internship in New Jersey at a company that I interned for in undergrad. But it was in their legal department. The head of the legal department was a woman. Her name was Joanne. And she pulled me in her office. I have no idea why. I was just a peon, like a little intern. I don't know why she pulled me in her office one day. I don't know. She said to me, she looked at me, she said, "Juanita, I think you're great.
Oh, wow.
I think you are amazing. I think you're going to be a brilliant attorney one day. I think that you are phenomenal. And I think that we can expect big things from you."
Oh, wow.
In that moment, I remember the tears welling up, and I do remember, I tell people this all the time, I remember how Oprah had just said, "Don't cry at work." So I was like, I don't care if this is a good moment, I'm going to hold it in, do not cry.
Yeah.
But I wanted to cry because one, not only was she speaking life to me at that moment, but I realized I didn't feel the way she felt about myself.
Right.
She felt more and saw more in me than I even saw in myself. And in that moment I thought, well, if she thinks that I'm going to be this way, why on earth do I not think that? If she thinks that I can do this, why on earth am I limiting myself and listening to this one person and one person's opinion? And I immediately changed. I decided to stay in law school. She changed the trajectory of my life in that moment.
Powerful.
How powerful. You never know where you meet someone on the walk of life, in their life.
Yes.
It takes a split second to either kill or speak life. I just want to be her for as many people as I possibly can. And so it shaped how I give. It shaped why I do philanthropy, why we're here in Dress for Success in London, why I pour into women. But it shaped the value that I gave to confidence, to self-esteem, self-worth, and knowing your identity and the value you put in self, and blocking out the narratives from others.
We don't have enough time. I wish we could even unpack it. However, everyone can get the book.
Absolutely, I'll talk about it in the book.
Because that part about speaking life just resonates with me so much.
Yes.
It could be with our children. It could be with our nieces, our nephews. It could be with a random child down the street. You never know how your word. Joanne would be surprised to know that her name is popping up years later.
Yes.
But we leave that mark. And, I love that. And I thank you very much for sharing that. Because I feel that when it comes to knowing yourself, we've all faced curveballs thrown at us by life.
Yes.
And these words of discouragement, you almost dropped out of law school. I've had a business that struggled and made me think, am I really able to do this?
Yes.
I went into business after getting my MBA and thinking I know a lot of what it is. And I did know, but business life challenges, disappointment, setback can mess with our minds.
Yes.
And when I believe very strongly that hurting people hurt people.
Oh, yes.
If we don't deal with the hurts that life has, because of what life has thrown at us, that has developed, we're not effective in our relationships.
Yes.
So it's important that we know ourselves and we can heal from the pains of the past.
Yes.
Get rid of the negative voices, because we need to be able to pour life into other people. And it could be anybody, people we work with.
Or even pour life into yourself.
Yes.
Because sometimes you'll be the only voice of encouragement.
That's
Encourage yourself in the Lord.
Encourage yourself.
Sometimes you are going to be the only voice, even walking down the street to yourself. It might be the only voice of encouragement that you hear that day, because sometimes people are not always focused on pouring into other people. But I do think that it's so important to know that who you are, what you value, to take the time. We just don't take the time to break that down. Yeah.
And when we talk about breaking it down, let's even go a bit deeper. In each of us, every one of us, we are a combination of our spirit, soul, body.
Yes.
And a lot of times we hear, you've got to take care of your body, you've got to exercise, and all of that good stuff. But I think it's just recently that the whole concept of mental health, which has always existed, is taking real front and center stage.
Yes.
Because we're starting to see that you can have it all and still feel your life isn't worth anything and take your life.
Absolutely.
It shocks a lot of people.
Yes.
So on the journey of knowing yourself and being able to, like I would say, to be kind to yourself, what are some of the key things when it comes to mental, emotional balance?
Yes.
What are some principles that you've come to learn as you've gone along on your walk?
Yes. Taking time. And when I say take, I mean that literally. Because sometimes life won't give you a minute to pause. You have to take it.
Right.
If you don't, you are the only person that will suffer. And sometimes we feel, especially as moms, as wives, we feel a bit selfish for taking the moment to ourselves, but you cannot pour from an empty cup.
That's right.
And sometimes, as women, as nurturers, we are the receptors, we nurture, we birth. It's our natural instinct to birth things for ourselves, for other people.
Yes.
We pour and we give and we give. We rely and look externally for people to pour into us. Sometimes you have to take a moment, what I've learned, and pour into yourself. If you do not invest in yourself, you look at it as an investment. Even time is an investment. And taking 10 minutes a day, you will be surprised. Build the muscle. Self-care is a muscle. Sometimes we have atrophy in our muscles because we haven't flexed it in a long time. So our self-care muscle is weak because we haven't used it. We feel guilty. We feel like, oh, I should be doing something else. I don't want to take this 10 minutes. Self-care is not always about reading a book or going to exercise. Sometimes it's being still.
It's being still.
Sometimes it's going to take a bath. Sometimes it's picking up your favorite scent and putting it on. Something that you do to yourself. But I think mentally, taking the journey to sit down and say, you know what, I cannot commit to say I'm going to take a weekend retreat to myself. That's not going to happen. Sometimes we don't have as moms, you can't disappear for a weekend. So it's just not
Just
going to
like
happen.
that.
You know,
That's
you
right.
just can't just, this is my weekend retreat with self. That's nice.
That's nice.
If you're in a season where you can do that, that's
Yeah.
great. Well, can you take 15 minutes
Right.
to give yourself, or even just once a week,
Yeah.
to start moving that muscle of self-care? In my book,
Mm.
it's on page 89. I talk about, and what I love about this book, and why it's one of my favorites, is because it's not just giving the theory, but there's a workbook in the back.
Yes.
And the workbook walks you through, because part of being free, the first for F is being faithful.
Yes.
And that's faithful to who you really are and what your value system is, and building that faith. So it takes you through these questions, and that you can do, you can copy it, you can download it, and do it every day. You can do it once a week, you can do it once a month. But taking 10, 15 minutes, commit to yourself to love yourself enough to say, who am I? What do I value? What do I feel most secure when? I feel insecure when. If you
process
Yes.
what's going on internally, be deliberate.
ask yourself what matters to you, and then don't make excuses for it, and don't apologize for it. But I think sometimes, people try to say, oh, well, money doesn't matter to me. That's okay if it really doesn't. But if it does, you will forever be in conflict with yourself, because you're lying to yourself.
Do you know, I like that, because in our next segment, I really want to take us into that area of finance and how it affects us, especially when we're talking about how do you really love yourself.
Yes.
There's some dimensions that I'm really excited. I'd love for us to explore, because of obviously some of the very amazing points you made in your book, and just even principles that we all need to really bring to the forefront of our mind. So once we come back from this break, we'll talk about it a bit more. Stay tuned, guys. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.